So today I want to make a kind of video that I haven't made before. That's going to be a top 10 list. I know a lot of people kind of like these kind of videos, and I like them too, but for whatever reason I haven't made one before, so figured today seemed like a good day to start. And today I want to talk about Modern Horizons. So this set's been out for a while now, and I opened quite a bit of it, so I feel like I'm pretty familiar with pretty much every card in the set. And I wanted to make a list of my personal top 10 cards. And what I mean by that is, I guess, how big of an impact these cards are going to have on me playing them. So that could be things like how often am I going to play them, how big of an impact will it have, or how many copies of a card am I going to play. First off, though, I want to just at least mention a few cards that didn't quite make this list, but I did want to talk about them a little bit anyway. So the first card is going to be Bone Shards. This is a common. But I'm really impressed by this card. It's very similar to another card, Bone Splinters, but this is just a huge upgrade on that card. Because for just one plaque, it's a sorcery speed, but as an additional cost to cast the spell, you can sacrifice a creature or discard a card. So Bone Splinters was just sack a creature, but then also you can destroy a creature or a planeswalker. Bone Splinters was just a creature. So uh, honestly, I could see the kind of the drawback of this card actually being a benefit in like a kind of madness type of deck. So I could definitely see myself playing this card, but there just isn't a deck that I have that it would go in currently. I think this could be good in both EDH or Modern. So this one is kind of just waiting on the sidelines for a deck to go in. The next card is going to be Prismatic Ending. Uh, I don't play this card in any decks currently also, but I mean, the power level of this card is kind of undeniable, right? Like it's exile any non-land permanent basically that can be up to 5 CMC, depending on how many colors you're playing. I see this card a lot when I play on Magic Online and Modern. There's also Dress Down. This card has gotten pretty popular recently, actually. I put this in my SIG EDH deck because I thought it seemed like a pretty cool ability. You know, making all creatures lose abilities, and it does cantrip. I think this is seen play in kind of like Thing in the Ice decks or something like that, but I only play this in one of my commander decks, but I could see myself playing it in potentially more, and you know, maybe it'll even potentially be a Modern staple. There's also Academy Manufactor. I like this card a lot. I'm a big fan of treasure tokens, so this works with treasure tokens. It also gives you clues and foods. I do play this in my Magda deck. Currently, that's the only deck that I have this in, but I could see this fitting into a lot of different commander decks. Maybe it could go in Modern too, but that would surprise me a little bit. And then this one actually, it's not in the actual top 10 list as per Sentinel. That might seem weird to a lot of people, but like I said, this is like my personal top 10. And I'm not currently playing this in any deck. I realize it is a very powerful card. You know, it sees a lot of play in Modern. It's great in Commander. But I currently I'm not playing it at all. But you know, if I do ever make a deck where it has white in it and it's about artifacts, I definitely see myself playing this card. So those are, I suppose, the kind of honorable mentions. We'll put those off to the side here. I'll get into the actual top 10 now. I'll start with, I suppose, number 10. I tried to order these from, lowest to highest. So at number 10, we've got Dauthi Voidwalker. This card is very powerful. It sees a lot of play in Modern. I think it's pretty good in Commander too. It's kind of a ley line of the void on a stick. The only thing with this card is that it's pretty squishy. Like, it's very easy to kill this card. It only has 2 toughness. But the deck that I play in Modern right now is Jund, so this goes great in Jund. However, I'm actually only playing this as a one of. So this can be played as up to 4 copies in Jund, but personally, I'm only playing 1 copy of it in the main deck and 0 in the sideboard. Because I like playing one ofs. I want to have access to this effect, but I feel like if I'm looking for graveyard hate, there are probably better cards that I could be playing. But then at the same time, this is also an evasive threat that has this ability that lets me cast cards from exile. So it's in the lowest part of the top 10, but it's still definitely in there. Next up, there's a card that might be surprising for a lot of people, this is going to be Verdant Command. It's probably not going to be in the top 10 lists of, best cards in the set, but it is a very good card, I think. And I'm playing more copies of this than I am playing Dauthi Voidwalker in my Jund deck. I think that's a little bit unorthodox, probably, but this card has actually impressed me a lot. The reason I like it is because this is a main deckable card it's kind of like a main deckable sideboard card because it's a graveyard hate card. It gains you life, so it's good against aggro and burn, but at the same time, it's never a dead card because at the very worst, you can go make 2 squirrels and gain 3 life, which is fine, right? Like that's good that's at least decent in pretty much any matchup. So I like this card because it's basically main deckable sideboard card. That's never going to be a dead card. It always does something at least decent. So I play this as a one of in my main deck and also another in my sideboard for Modern Jund. And this is good for, like, can be good for Commander also. I did have this in my Chatterfang deck, but I just recently cut it. I can see myself putting it back in though. It's kind of borderline for that, I think. Speaking of Chatterfang though, here's Chatterfang itself, coming in at number 7, I guess. Wait, 10, 9, coming at number 8. I mean, probably not seeing much play in Modern, but it's, I'm pretty sure the most popular commander from the set. And this is the commander that I chose to make for this set. Typically, I'll only make maybe 1 commander per set. This is what I chose. I mean, squirrels are pretty awesome, right? If you want to see me talk about this card in depth, you can go take a look at my deck tech that I did for the Chatterfang EDH deck, but it's a very powerful commander. I think the most popular commander from the set. Definitely is going to be in the top 10 for me. The next card is Urza's Saga. So for this card, I kind of have a love-hate relationship with it, I guess, because this card is amazing. Like, there's no denying its power, but at the same time, it annoys me because of how often I have to play against it in Modern. I actually think this card should be banned in Modern. I think it's a bit too powerful. I mean, it's just like an instant inclusion in so many decks that's kind of free to play. But at the same time, I'm not personally playing it in Modern, but I'm playing it in multiple EDH decks. So this is definitely going to be in the top 10. It could be ranked higher, I think. Like, if we were talking about just power level of cards, this could potentially be number 1 of the set. But for me personally, it's going to come in at number 7. The next one, Ragavan. This one in other lists, this probably could also be number 1. But I've got it at number 6 because, I mean, it's another one where there is no denying its power level. But personally, I'm only playing this in potentially 1 commander deck. This also could go in Modern Jund. A lot of people like to play this as up to a 4 of in Jund. I'm not really about that kind of Jund. I prefer more of the traditional route with a slightly higher curve, I suppose. But I can definitely see myself playing this in multiple EDH decks. I might put it in my Magda deck. I'm not quite sure because it does make treasures. However, it's not a dwarf, but I felt like this had to be in the top 10. At least in the middle towards the top. I mean, Ragavan, it's a very good guard. So let's numbers 10 through 5. Going into the top half now. At number 5, wait, that's numbers 10 through 6. So coming in at number 5, we've got Endurance. This card costs so much on Magic Online. I think it's like 70 tickets, but it's a really powerful card. I like this because it's proactive graveyard hate. Currently I play this as a one of in my sideboard in Jund. I could see myself playing more copies. I haven't been able to test this card so much yet because it's so expensive on Magic Online. I'm not willing to pay that much for it, so I haven't played it on Magic Online. But I do have it in my paper deck, and I feel like once I get to play with it a little bit more, I could definitely see myself upping the number of copies that I'm playing. Because like I said, basically the appeal to me of this is that it's proactive graveyard hate. Because typically for graveyard hate, you would play things like, Nihil Spellbomb or Leyline of the Void, where it's the only thing that card does is, prevents your opponent from messing around with their graveyard. Maybe it draws a card. But it puts a 3/4 into play with Flash and Reach for just 3 mana. That's a really good rate to me, I think. And then there's also just the awesome ability of being able to play it for free. So currently, like I said, I only play as a 1-of, but I could see myself playing potentially up to 4 copies of this. But it's a card that really, it depends on what the metagame looks like for how much it's going to shine. So now, coming in at number 4, we've got a card. So with these cards, they're going to be ones that mostly I'm playing multiple copies of in multiple different decks. That's definitely the case for this one. It's Yavimaya, Cradle of Growth. So this, I mean, it's basically a color-shifted Urborg, but that's pretty awesome. So I play this in, I believe, currently 3 of my decks, but I would see myself playing this in any commander deck that plays green. It's just that good of a card. So for that reason, I have it placed pretty highly at number 4. Number 3 is actually only a card that I'm playing as a 1-of, again, like Endurance, but I have been able to play with this card a lot, and it's impressed me a lot more than I thought that it would, which is Grist, the Hunger Tide. I play this in my Modern Jund deck. At first, I thought this card would be just okay in Jund, and I didn't even think about really playing it at first, but then I watched some videos of other people playing it, and it seemed pretty decent, and I've been really impressed with this when I play it, because you can just, for the sake of playing it in Jund, you can just ignore this part, the first part of the passive ability there. But just being a 3-mana Planeswalker that can tick up to make a token is a very powerful ability. Because typically when you're making a token, you're either going 0 or down, or the ability might be on like a 5 or 6 mana Planeswalker. But for a Planeswalker that you can play as early as turn 2 if you have some ramp, and then start ticking up to make creatures, that can kind of run away with the game. But then it also has this -2 where you can destroy a creature or a Planeswalker. It's a very powerful effect to have on a Planeswalker. And the -5 is definitely relevant too. It's pretty easy to get to -5. It's not a huge effect unless you're building around this card, but it is definitely relevant in, even just any random mid-range deck, because late in the game you could have like 10 creatures in your graveyard. You can go -5 and just win the game with that. And also the +1 does feed into the -5 by potentially putting more creatures in your graveyard. But then also, this is outside of playing this in Modern, this is great in Commander too. I do actually play this in one of my Commander decks. I play this in my Chatterfang deck because this makes tokens, and Chatterfang's all about tokens. So this makes, insects and squirrels if I have Chatterfang in play. But then also, this is a great commander too. If I didn't already have 2 Golgari commander decks, I could definitely see myself making a commander deck about this card, because it's a really cool and unique commander to build around. So there's just 2 spots left. So these cards are going to be my personal number 2, I suppose, favorite cards from this set. Maybe not necessarily favorite, but just the top 2 cards that have an impact on me playing, I guess. This one, number 2, is going to be Ignoble Hierarch. So I've said, many times before in the video that I've played Jund in Modern, and this is one of the reasons that I started playing Jund, actually. It was just a recent transition, because I used to play Burn for the longest time, but then I switched to playing Jund. And this is one of the reasons that I made that choice, because I had wanted to play Jund for a while, but one of the main problems that I had with it was that I felt like the mana wasn't the best. Like, it's not bad, it's decent mana, but you're playing like double black and double red cards, and there are definitely times where that causes problems where you don't have the colors you need to play a card. And Ignoble Hierarch just fixes that, basically. Like, it's a Noble Hierarch, but for Jund. But then also, one of the main weaknesses that the Jund deck has is playing against Blood Moon, and this card does a lot to help mitigate that problem too, because if all of your lands are mountains, but you've played this early on, this can give you access to all of your colors still. So currently I play this as a 3-of. I did play it as a 4-of for a long time, but I cut 1 copy, but I definitely could endorse playing this as a 4-of. I think this card is great. And actually, another cool thing that happens a lot with this card is when you're playing Bloodbraid Elf, it seems like normally it would be kind of crappy to just hit, you know, a mana dork off of a Bloodbraid Elf, just your 1-drop. But since it has Exalted, that's pretty decent actually, because you know, you play your Bloodbraid Elf, you cascade into this, you attack, your elf is now a 4/3 rather than a 3/2, and having that extra 1 point of toughness makes a big difference a lot of the time, because there are lots of creatures that have just 2 power, so it allows your Bloodbraid Elf to attack in without having to trade with some random little creature. So there's 10 through 2. So now we've got the number 1 card. Let's see if you can guess it. This card is at number 1 because I play it in, I believe, 4 different EDH decks. This card has basically replaced what was one of my favorite cards to play in multiple EDH decks before. It's an equipment, and this is Sword of Hearth and Home. This is my personal number 1 card from this set because of what I just said. Basically, it goes in so many different commander decks. Pretty much, I would play this in pretty much any commander deck, any one that I have built currently. One of my favorite cards to play in commander is Sword of the Animist, because it basically gives you a rampant growth every turn just for attacking, and then also gives you +1/+1. But this card is almost a better version of that card. I wouldn't go so far as to say that it is straight up a better version of it, because there are some subtle differences, but it's close enough to where I've replaced Sword of the Animist in each of my decks with this. Either that, or I'll just play both of them. And so the upgrade for this is that you know, it gives you +2/+2 instead of +1/+1. It gives you protection from green and white, which is actually pretty big, because a lot of creatures that people are playing are green, and there's a lot of kind of removal type effects in white. But also, with Sword of the Animist, what it does is when you attack, you basically get to cast a Rampant Growth, so you get a basic land out of your deck and put it into play tapped. This does that. However, you also get to exile up to 1 creature you control and then put it back on the battlefield, so you get to kind of cast like a Cloud Shift or an Ephemerate. You get to flicker one of your creatures. So there's, you know, you get the protection, the +2/+2, and the flicker effect. But there is a drawback. With Sword of the Animist, you only have to attack in order to get the trigger to get the basic land. But for this, you have to connect. So that can be a pretty relevant difference, because if your opponent isn't playing green and white creatures, they can just block, or they could just remove your creature before it deals damage, and then you don't get the land. And if you're depending on this to get your land, then, you know, that can kind of suck. So because of that, I would say this is not just a strict upgrade to Sword of the Animist, but it's pretty close. And overall, I would say this is a better card. So for those reasons, this is my number 1 card from Modern Horizons. I think I opened maybe 4 copies of this in the boxes that I opened. It might have been 5, somewhere between 3 and 5. But I'm using pretty much all of those. And then I even also went out and bought an extra copy. There's the retro etched foil, just because I like the card so much. I want the cool pimped out version of it. But yeah, this is my number 1 card. So you can see here my top 10, my personal top 10 cards from this set. I keep on wanting to say my top 10 favorite cards, but that's not quite what this is, because, you know, these aren't necessarily my favorite cards. Like, I would say if I was just going by favorite, Academy Manufactor would be in the top 10, but since I'm only potentially playing it in 1 commander deck, it didn't really make the cut. But I tried to keep it more towards cards that I'm actually playing and playing multiple copies of in a lot of cases. But let me know what you think. How does this differ from your personal top 10 cards from the set? Are there any cards that maybe you would rank higher or lower? Or are there any cards that I didn't mention at all? Because there are so many awesome cards in Modern Horizons 2. I could definitely see some cards that I didn't mention at all being in other people's top 10 lists, maybe even being number 1, you know. But yeah, that's what I've got for this first top 10 video. If you like the video, let me know. It'd be cool if you can like and subscribe and that kind of stuff. But otherwise, I'll talk to you later.